This video is sponsored by Established Titles, a fun and novel way to preserve the natural woodlands of Scotland while helping global reforestation efforts. Established Titles is a project based on a historic Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies in English. With their title packs, you can buy as little as 1 square foot of land in Edelston in Scotland, so you can call yourself a lord or lady on credit cards and plane tickets. While you won't be a real noble or able to sit in the House of Lords, more importantly, Established Titles will work with charities One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to plant a tree with every order. Once you receive your unique plot number, you can officially change your name to Lord or Lady.
You will be calling me Lord!
Title packs make a great last-minute gift, and couples packs come with adjoining plots of land. I'm told that the first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will be placed nearby to my plot. We could build our own operations room, or even better, a pub. Established Titles is running a massive Black Friday sale right now. Plus, if you use the code The Operations Room, you can get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/The Operations Room to get your gifts now and help support the channel and global tree planting charities. At 6:45 AM on the morning of December the 18th, 1944, the third day of the Battle of the Bulge, soldiers of the 2nd Infantry Division spot German armour approaching their position on the Elsenborn Ridge. The 600 men of the 1st Battalion of the 9th Infantry Regiment are under the command of Lieutenant Colonel William D. McKinley, the grandnephew of the American President with whom he shares a name. He has been tasked with defending the twin villages of Rochorath Crinkelt at all costs. 1st Battalion's objective is to buy time for a new defensive line to be constructed behind them, as they are currently the only unit that can stop the German 12th SS Panzer Division from breaking through and cutting off the entire 2nd Infantry Division. The ensuing battle rages for hours. The American infantrymen are outnumbered 2-1, but they have a significant advantage in artillery. The Elsenborn Ridge dominates the entire Ardennes region and provides a natural platform for American heavy guns. The Germans quickly learn how formidable this position is as they advance on Rochorath Crinkelt. In one 20-minute fire mission, 348 artillery pieces fire 5,760 rounds in support of the defenders at the twin villages. These guns can reach anywhere on the entire northern shoulder and must be neutralised by the Germans. 1st Battalion holds off the first attacks with help from tank destroyers and artillery support, but their defensive lines are gradually overwhelmed one by one. German Panthers and Panzer IVs score hits on the few M10 tank destroyers and breach the outer defences. The Panzers then drive over the battalion's trenches and iron them in, collapsing the trench walls and trapping the defenders under snow and dirt. American anti-tank gun crews fire back with their 57mm guns, but find that their rounds are bouncing off the enemy tanks. The fighting gets so desperate that McKinley's forward units call in artillery fire on their own positions as they are overrun by the German attackers. Finally, McKinley receives orders to withdraw to the new defensive line, but by this time the enemy is so close that he is unable to extricate his men from the fight. The front line has been broken and SS troops are starting to pour towards the village. Just as the entire battalion is about to be overwhelmed, 4 Sherman tanks from the 741st Tank Battalion appear like cavalry riding to the rescue. The Shermans surprise the SS division and quickly knock out 3 Panzers. The enemy attack finally falters, and Lieutenant Colonel McKinley's men are able to retreat in good order after the timely arrival of the American armour. A skeleton crew of American infantry now holds the twin villages as a rearguard after 1st Battalion falls back. Frustrated by the delays, the commander of the 12th SS Panzer Division throws in his reserves to finally overrun the last GIs. 2 regiments, 1 Volksgrenadier and 1 Panzer Grenadier, supported by a fresh battalion of 96 Panther tanks, 80 mechanised half-tracks, and 12 Jagdpanzer tank destroyers, form up for the final assault. Facing them are the remnants of the 38th Infantry Regiment with a platoon each of Shermans and M10 tank destroyers. The 801st Tank Destroyer Battalion and their towed artillery also digs in and brings its guns to bear on the approaching enemy. In the mid-afternoon, the Panthers and Jagdpanzers storm the twin villages while the American defenders fire back with bazookas. The GIs have barricaded the houses and skillfully hidden their few remaining tanks. They managed to catch the Panthers and Jagdpanzers in the vulnerable side armour, destroying them one after the other. The Germans do take heavy casualties in the narrow streets, with over 30 armoured vehicles lost to American anti-tank guns through the day. Eventually, the weight of numbers is too much, and the rearguard is eventually forced to retreat by the afternoon. The Rocherath-Krinkelt area will be nicknamed the Panzer Graveyard by the Germans who fought for it. It's the third day of the Ardennes offensive, and the situation hangs in the balance. The German 5th Panzer Army has forced a massive breakthrough in the centre of the American line, while the 6th Panzer Army is launching desperate assaults on the Elsenborn Ridge along the northern shoulder of the advance. Any hope of stopping the Panzers from reaching the Meuse River and dashing to Antwerp rests with the battered American divisions along with other scratch units caught up in the offensive. They must hold until reinforcements from across the Western Front arrive on the scene.
Kampfgruppe Peiper is continuing its advance in the north, searching for bridges that will take the armoured formation closer to the Meuse crossings. Peiper has been forced to deviate from the path personally chosen by the Führer due to poor roads and inadequate bridges which can't support the weight of his immense King Tiger tanks. His only goal now is to keep exploiting his local breakthrough and get to the Meuse as quickly as possible. Peiper attacks the village of Stavelot in the morning, where a company of the American 526th Armoured Infantry Battalion has set up an anti-tank barrier to stop the Germans from breaking into the town and taking its critical bridge over the Amblève River. The Americans are still positioning their men and anti-tank guns in Stavelot when they're surprised by 2 Panther tanks and a company of Panzer Grenadiers charging down the hillside on the road to the bridge. The Americans manage to knock out the first Panther, which bursts into flames, but it has built up such speed going downhill that it smashes right through the anti-tank barrier. The second Panther exploits the opening and occupies the bridge, followed rapidly by the Panzer Grenadiers. 57mm anti-tank guns fire several ineffective rounds at the German tank before they are overrun. Thanks to the stunning assault, the Americans are unable to blow the bridge, and Peiper's men are one step closer to the Meuse. Fighting for Stavelot will continue over the next days, but over 800 SS vehicles will cross over Stavelot's bridge on December 18th alone.
By the late morning, the men of the 1st Battalion, 9th Infantry Regiment have retired to their new defensive line further up the Elsenborn Ridge. Their holding action at Rocherath-Krinkelt has allowed the 2nd Division to re-establish a firm front, but the battalion has lost almost 70% of its strength during its desperate defence. Units from the 9th Infantry Division are moved to the front to bolster the line, while the rearguard at the twin villages continues to hold back the bulk of the 12th SS Panzer Division. A convoy of 7 American trucks approaches a battalion of 99th Infantry from the southeast. A US tank destroyer fires a round over the leading truck, compelling it to stop. A patrol goes forward to properly identify the convoy. Suddenly, the men in the trucks open fire on the patrol, and a wave of German soldiers pile out of the convoy. On the first day of the offensive, the infamous Waffen-SS commander Otto Skorzeny led an English-speaking commando team through Allied lines wearing American uniforms and driving captured Allied vehicles. Although their activities have been mostly confined to minor acts of sabotage, their presence has caused chaos and paranoia behind the front line. This is a Trojan horse trick. A different group of 140 SS soldiers in their own SS uniforms are attempting to penetrate the American lines using captured vehicles. However, the American defenders direct mortar fire and heavy machine guns on the SS troops, and the battle quickly becomes a rout. About 3/4 of the German soldiers become casualties before they retreat in disarray. Their brazen attempt to bypass the American line on the Elsenborn Ridge demonstrates the importance of this high ground, control over which now determines the outcome of the 6th Panzer Army's northern thrust. Meanwhile, Peiper has gotten much of his force through Stavelot, and he is now searching for a new bridge to the west. As of right now, there are no sizable Allied units between him and the Meuse. When his scouts locate another intact bridge at the village of Toipont, Kampfgruppe Peiper moves to exploit the opportunity. But just as the armoured column arrives, American engineers manage to blow the bridge before they can start crossing. Despite this setback, another bridge is discovered at Cheneux, and the column manages to capture it and cross. Unbeknownst to Peiper, his force has been spotted by a low-flying American scout aircraft, which relays their position. In the centre of the line, the Germans launched 3 major attacks on the mixture of American units defending St Vith. Despite being outnumbered and low on ammunition, the remnants of the 106th Division and the 7th Armoured Division doggedly hold their ground thanks in part to unceasing artillery support. However, a large salient is developing around the critical road junction, and the American units are in danger of being cut off. With daylight running out, Peiper's scouts find another bridge over the Lienne River. At the same time, Peiper is leading his column across the bridge at Cheneux, when the weather temporarily clears. US Army Air Force P-47s descend on his exposed force while Peiper runs for cover. The Allied strike aircraft, nicknamed the Jabos by the Germans, bombs the Kampfgruppe, while Whirlwind anti-aircraft guns attempt to drive them off. An SS Panzer Grenadier recalls that the Jabos hung in the air like wasps, but several are shot down by the Whirlwinds. By the time the attack is over, 2 Panthers along with 10 other vehicles are destroyed and Peiper's advance is again delayed. Rushing to make up for lost time, his lead vehicle races to the bridge and is just about to cross when it is blown up in their faces by American engineers who had been alerted to his attack by the P-47 raid. Desperate, Peiper sends a tank company to the north to force a crossing at the last bridge in the area. As the Panzers approach the final bridge, they are met with vicious anti-tank fire. The Americans have laid an ambush after being alerted by the scout aircraft. After fighting off the ambush at great cost, German tankmen are dismayed to discover that the bridge isn't strong enough to support their vehicles. With no more crossings left on this route, Peiper must turn his entire column around and return to where he started the day. At this moment, elements of the 82nd Airborne and other American units are arriving to block Kampfgruppe Peiper's advance west and counterattack the overextended force. Miles to the south, the situation is far worse for the Americans. The Panzer Lehr and 2nd Panzer Divisions have been advancing throughout the day towards Bastogne. Both armoured divisions have been frustrated by traffic jams and small pockets of resistance, but considerable American reinforcements are still too far out to block the German advance. In Bastogne itself, the first echelons of the 101st Airborne and 10th Armoured Divisions are arriving in the area. Brigadier General McAuliffe of the 101st and Colonel William Roberts of the 10th Armoured are informed by 8th Corps Commander General Troy Middleton that their units are needed on the front as soon as possible. Move with the utmost speed, hold these positions at all costs. To buy time for arriving units to take up defensive positions, General Middleton dispatches Task Forces Harper and Rose of the 9th Armoured Division to cover the main roads leading into Bastogne from the east. They are to establish 2 roadblocks northeast of the village of Longvilly and hold off the Germans as long as possible. Task Force Rose is about to be assaulted by the heavy tanks of the 2nd Panzer Division with support from a Volksgrenadier artillery regiment. They have already held off 2 probing attacks, but the main body of German armour is now bearing down on them. The roadblock of Task Force Rose is engaged first as daylight is fading. Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Harper commands the second roadblock 3 miles behind and learns right away that the first roadblock is about to be overrun. He requests to move up and relieve Task Force Rose, only to be denied. He can only sit helplessly and listen on the radio, while his comrades up the road are annihilated. Only a few stragglers make it back to Task Force Harper, just as enemy artillery begins to fall on the second roadblock. Harper's men are positioned in a textbook anti-tank defence. His infantry have laid mines on the road, while a 57mm anti-tank gun is emplaced on higher ground to cover any advance. Shermans and half-tracks along with infantry entrench in the shape of a horseshoe around the junction. Harper keeps a platoon of Shermans in reserve to counterattack any enemy breakthrough. 17 Sherman tanks and some infantry are about to stand up to the entire 2nd Panzer Division. Harper's position soon faces probing attacks from the German forward infantry elements. His Shermans and infantry manage to beat back the first enemy assaults, which are not supported by armour. However, it is not long before Panzer IVs, Panthers and Stugs begin to arrive in force. Rather than charge the main road with the minefield in place, the Panzers instead hang back and use their superior firepower to engage the American armour. In the darkness of the night, the German tanks use the flames of knocked out half-tracks and Shermans to target other vehicles silhouetted by the flames. They destroy the American tanks one by one. Recognising the hopeless situation, Harper orders the rest of his command to withdraw to Longville without him. He takes his reserve platoon of Shermans and launches a brave counterattack against the Panzers, determined to give his retreating men the best chance of survival. Every American tank is destroyed, and Lieutenant Colonel Harper is killed in the doomed charge. He is posthumously awarded the Bronze Star. By the end of the night, Task Forces Rose and Harper are entirely wiped out. Yet, their sacrifice is not in vain. They have further delayed the German advance, and the race to Bastogne is one where every hour counts. The German vanguard reaches the outskirts of Bastogne to find Longville and the village of Neuville already occupied by the first arriving elements of the 101st Airborne and the 10th Armoured Division. The 5th Panzer Army's attempt to take Bastogne without a fight has failed. The following morning, on December the 19th, the men of Kampfgruppe Peiper are ready to resume the advance after their discouraging experience the previous day. They attack and capture the town of Stoumont, preparing for another push towards the Meuse. However, Peiper is stunned to learn that an American counterattack has retaken Stavelot and cut off his spearhead. He is forced to turn his entire force around once again, so he can retake Stavelot and reopen his supply lines. In the centre, the 422nd and 423rd Infantry Regiments of the 106th Infantry Division have been cut off since the second day of the offensive. Running short of ammunition and food, both regiments surrender. Almost 8,000 Americans fall into German captivity, the largest mass surrender of Americans ever in Europe. Yet the remainder of the 106th Division continues to hold out in the St Vith salient. The defenders are stretched thin, as the line they must cover continues to grow. On the northern shoulder, Kampfgruppe Peiper continues to have a frustrating time. Peiper's men have successfully retaken Stavelot and reopened his supply line, but at the cost of wasting the entire afternoon when they had hoped to move west. After dark, American soldiers from the 105th Engineer Battalion under the command of Captain Leyland Kofer infiltrate the town and head for the main bridge across the Amblev River. Kofer and his men place 20 50-pound boxes of TNT in one stack directly under the first span. The engineers work quietly and with urgency while the Germans are oblivious to their presence. Just as they are finishing their work, a German sentry spots them and the engineers start taking machine gun and tank fire. Kofer leads his men as they run free of the bridge and scatter. Kofer then detonates the explosives, which blow a large hole in the span. The company commander, Captain James Rice, cracks to an embedded Associated Press reporter, "No German tank can jump that." Much of Peiper's column is now trapped on the other side of the Amblev River. SS men execute 23 civilians that night in a rage. Over the course of the day in Verdun, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower has been presiding over a council of war. He is focused on Bastogne, which is quickly becoming the point of convergence for the entire German offensive. Eisenhower intends to redirect General George Patton's Third Army from their position in the south and attack north to relieve the town. He asks Patton, "When can you start?" To which the boastful Patton responds, "As soon as you're through with me." Patton has secretly made preparations for this attack and his lead units are already heading north. Night falls on December the 19th, the day German panzers were supposed to be rolling into Antwerp. American resistance, poor roads and snowy weather has successfully delayed the German offensive. To make matters worse, the Wehrmacht is expending twice as much fuel as originally planned for, and its armoured formations have still not broken free of the difficult terrain of the Ardennes forest. Yet, all that is needed is one final effort to push towards the Meuse before Allied reinforcements can arrive. In Bastogne, the men of Easy Company are finally on the ground and moving towards their designated sector near the tiny village of Foy. On the way through Bastogne, they pass columns of defeated and shell-shocked American soldiers struggling to the rear. "They were just babbling," Captain Dick Winters recalled. It was pathetic, we felt ashamed. His enterprising men take advantage of the situation and begin relieving the retreating soldiers of their spare ammunition. As the paratroopers settle in and start digging their foxholes, they hear the unmistakable sound of small arms fire. The battle for the villages of Longvilly and Neuville have begun. This sound is soon replaced by the rattling of tank engines as the German Panzers move to encircle Bastogne. Easy Company continues to dig their holes carefully and deep. Thanks to this week's guest narrator, Jesse Alexander of Real Time History and the Great War YouTube channels. On our sister channel, The Intel Report, this week, we're looking at the US infantryman's perspective of the largest US surrender in Europe during the Second World War. See you next week for part 3.